Hello, this is Christian Hahn. I'm CEO of Hubcheck, and I'm very happy to welcome today my good friend Orlin from AMPECO, who is joining us for the first edition of our EV Charging Minds podcast. What we would like to achieve is talking about the latest trends in the industry, what is right now moving the industry, what trends do we see, how we also want to tackle together the challenges we are facing right now, and therefore, very happy to welcome you, Orlin. If you don't mind, would be great to introduce yourself shortly to our listeners.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And it's both an honor, but also a little bit worried. This is the first podcast, so we shouldn't mess it up, right? Thanks for having me. I'm Orlin. I'm one of the co-founders of AMPECO. In the e-mobility space, we are a little bit in the background. We enable others to be active in the space and to build out the EV charging infrastructure that supports EV adoption. At AMPECO, we are building a platform that the larger EV charging networks use to run their business, manage their networks, make sure that everything's running smoothly for their users, for their partners, and efficiently for their own team. And we've been building the platform for the past 7 years. We now have customers using the AMPECO platform in 70 countries, all across Europe, but also more globally, and we'll be able to talk about it, and I'll share also my views on how the mobility is developing globally. That's what we've been doing. By the way, I'm based in Sofia in Bulgaria, so not in the market with the highest EV adoption. So it's interesting to see also these parallels between the markets where are more developed, where most of our customer base is, like how it's happening in the Nordics, in Netherlands, UK, and Germany, compared to how it's happening in the market where I drive my EV for the past 7 years.
Thanks, Orlin. Super insightful, and I think also a very kind way of introducing AMPECO, because indeed I'm very often speaking right now about you and your company, because you really seem to be a very successful company right now. So congratulations. You just mentioned that you're driving around with your EV in Bulgaria and probably also abroad. Please feel free to share with us how you came to the idea of driving an EV probably a couple of years ago. What was for you the main reason to switch to electric vehicles when it was not very common yet in Bulgaria?
Well, I've been excited for e-mobility for way before I actually founded AMPECO. My first touch point with the industry in some ways as a consumer, but also as someone that wanted to be involved more than consumer, was I think it was 2010 or 2011. A couple of my friends, they wanted to start a company where they'll be converting regular cars to electric, and they asked me to help them with the business setup, because I've been an entrepreneur with my own businesses before, and I was excited about the idea. I didn't know anything about EVs at this point, and we went to China actually because they had this idea that they'll be sourcing the battery packs from China, and I went with them, and actually this is where I drove an EV for the first time, and it's a funny story. I was driving one of these small EVs, which is more of a golf cart more than a real car. But I'm driving it in the factory compound, and I'm driving. It's a 2-seater, so I'm driving, and besides me is the guy from the factory, the English-speaking guy who's showing us this. And the car, to be honest, today is very different with Chinese brand. But back then, this car, it was awful. And on every bump, I feel like something is going to fall off. And I'm like, I'm telling the guy, well, something can fall off from the car. And he's like, don't worry, we are in the factory compound. So he was like, even if it falls down, no problem. But so long story short, it turns out that the technology wasn't really there for what we wanted to do as a business. And while I didn't think this car is the future, I thought this type of car is the future. I really was amazed by the fact that I can drive on electricity. And while I didn't do anything with this for a while, we didn't start eventually the conversion business. Later on in 2017, I got excited about car sharing. I drove a car in I think it was in Munich, and it was not electric, but it was a shared one. And I liked very much the idea of not owning, sharing these vehicles. And I thought, I want to do this. I want to do it with electric cars though. And I was researching how I'm going to run a fleet of shared electric vehicles. And I thought I'll be buying, I have to build some infrastructure for these vehicles to be charged. And this is when I got exposed to the EV charging space. I realized actually there's way more than just buying the hardware when it comes to EV charging. And during this research, I came up with the concept of what became AMPECO.
Understood. Super insightful. Thanks for sharing this. And I can imagine starting all of this in 2017, starting a company was definitely an adventure, I would say, right? It was still super early days of EV adoption all around the world. Of course, we had made some progress in countries like Norway or the Netherlands, but I think overall in the rest of the world, it was still an early phase. So impressive that you had this idea already that early and then moving forward with setting up a company. You just mentioned a bit how you experienced for your first time EVs, electric vehicles in China, and you also mentioned that things have moved forward. What is right now your perspective on this, right? Because we are discussing quite often, especially here in Europe, and also taking into account what happened in the last days, where we talked about the whole tariff topic between Europe and the US. In parallel, we're discussing how the European EV OEMs can survive. What is your perspective on this? What do you think are Chinese OEMs maybe doing better or differently than European OEMs when it's about EV adoption?
Well, first of all, I mean, I drive a German EV, and my second car is a German EV, but I have looked into Chinese models even myself. I think the Chinese have done very well to adopt to a new technology, to a totally new way of propulsion, of building the vehicles, and maybe also because they don't have the same cost in because many of the companies that actually are now the Chinese ones that are now dominating, these are not old automotive companies. I mean, no. BYD, it's the like of Xiaopeng, NIO. These companies didn't have prior investments, prior markets, prior customer base to worry about, and they just went all in. And also it's also the government went all in. I mean, it's subsidized, it created competition, but also a way for these companies to develop. And I think there are way too many EV charging startups, also companies. I mean, some of those not necessarily could be called startups in China, but this competition also for the internal market, it really made them evolve their offerings, their technology, their manufacturing, and now they're a phase where they have the biggest internal market, and they have the technology and the manufacturing power. So they're very difficult to compete against. And European manufacturers, I think they have been too cautious in keeping the old, not cannibalizing their own customer base and revenues by switching to be more aggressive in switching to EVs, and this has shown. I mean, this has put them in a bad position to compete against the Chinese manufacturers. So I expect that there's only that long that you can keep them away with tariffs. Eventually, it's just about the superiority of the technology and the manufacturing processes. Just because you're only doing this one and you're doing it at high volumes, so it's I don't see this getting easier for the European manufacturers. And I do want to continue driving a German EV, but because it's better, not because it's manufactured in Europe for some other reason, right?
Understood. Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I really like your description of the Chinese OEMs. When they started this, they had nothing to lose, right? So I think that's pretty. So it's either about being successful or dropping out of the market. And probably that's a good motivational factor to drive things forward. What I quite often receive about Chinese OEMs is that, of course, they also have this wonderful approach of providing a lot of digital services, right? It's really reflecting very well, especially on needs of younger customers. AMPECO is also active in Middle East as a subject as well, and this is what I really like most about Middle East and EV adoption, that in fact most of the potential customers buying cars in this region are relatively young, right? I think 40% roundabout of all the people younger than 30 years. So they, of course, are more used to, let's say, digital services and mobile apps than other generations are. And of course, these customers have some expectations when it's about buying their first car, that the car is also a digital platform. And that's definitely where I see where most more traditional OEMs are lacking, wherever they're coming from. That's not only valid for German or European OEMs. I think that's also valid for most of the traditional OEMs. And on the other end, Asian OEMs are quite often using their cars as digital platforms. Not to speak of their development cycles, right? I think also comparing a bit how long it takes to produce a new product in the OEM space in traditional OEMs versus new OEMs, where they can do this in 6, 12, maybe 18 months compared to a couple of years with more traditional OEMs. I think these are really good examples what we need to achieve, let's say, in Europe, but also in other markets in regards of how OEMs can move forward. And let's see, exciting times, really, really exciting times. Talking about customer experience, I think that's a good link to our next chapter, where we not only want to focus on mass market customer experience, Orlin. We are joining this year again as our platinum sponsor, our Intercharge network conference. We are very grateful for this because that helps us setting up this conference, where we're expecting up to 6,000 participants this year. But we also wanted to exactly discuss this. How can we shape customer experience and bridge the gap to the mass market adoption? And we see that probably in the last couple of years, we discussed, not saying the same topics, but some repetitive patterns, I would say, how we can move forward or how we need to move forward. One topic is, of course, reliability. That charging infrastructure needs to be more reliable. Personally, I have the gut feeling that we are speaking less about it. Let's discuss in a second if that's an indicator that it's going in the right direction, or we just have other more urgent topics to solve. Of course, customer experience is very important. Not sure if that's the same in Bulgaria, but I think especially in Germany, but not only in Germany, we are right now discussing a lot the question, how can I understand the price for charging before I'm going to a charging station, which is still a bit of a complex topic. And last but not least, we mentioned it already a bit, digital services, B2C, but I think also this is a very important success factor for B2B as well. I've seen as AMPECO, we have launched a couple of new corporations which are focusing on providing additional digital services via your platform. So it would be good to discuss this in a second as well. But let's start maybe with the reliability topic. I said maybe it's less of an issue right now because it's less visible. Or what is your perspective, Orlin?
Well, I told you how I got exposed to the EV charging space, but how I really got to experience it myself is I went and bought an EV from Germany, and I drove it back to Sofia in 2018, and I got to, because it was a BMW i3 with a smaller battery, right? So it was quite an expedition, 35, 36 hours, and more than 20 charging stops. It was also kind of by design. I did want to experience firsthand what it is to charge cross borders, not just in one country, but across borders, different providers. And it was quite the journey in 2018 that showed me everything about reliability, user experience. And by the way, reliability, I think, is just one of the things that goes into the customer experience. And it's one that really breaks the customer experience if you just can't rely on service. But it's one of the many things that you have to do right in order to achieve a good customer experience. And then I last year when I came to the ICNC, I repeated this, and I went with my EV again from Sofia to Berlin and back. And yeah, I mean, there is a reason we're talking less about reliability, because we have done improvements in this aspect. We haven't solved it though, and we definitely haven't solved the whole customer experience, where reliability is just part of it. I think we're getting in this, and now I'll be happy to. I'm very happy that I'll be again at the ICNC in September, and I'll actually talk about this more in my keynote. But we're getting in this phase where we're expected to be very mature as an industry. When it comes to the customers expect maturity. I mean, they're no longer. It's no longer the early adopters that are using the charger side. I mean, nowadays we're going mainstream, which also means that the expectation is just user experience should be flawless.
It should work, exactly.
But as an industry, I think we're still not as mature. Not from the technology, not from the level of cooperation that we're doing, not from the level of integration that we're doing. So there's this mismatch between the expectation of the customer and where the industry is, which we need to work on. So,
yeah. But what is your perspective? Why is that a blocking point? Why is it just not working like that? Because with whoever I'm speaking about this, same statement: we need to work together. We need to make it happen shortly. In reality, it's not going to happen. It's not happening right now. What is your perspective on this? Why it's not happening right now?
I don't really think it's so much about trust. It's more about resources. We have everyone in this industry. We have to work with some constraints in terms of resources, and the integration points, the collaboration points that you have to do are way too many to handle within your resources. So you have to be picky on where you spend your resources. And it's not yet clear what is the winning strategy position, who is going to be the one that I really have to focus to integrate it, whether it's integrate commercially, technically, what is the protocols and the technologies that I really have to double down on. These things are not yet at the level of maturity where you can be confident that you're doing the right choice in terms of where you're putting your resources. And this means that you're hesitant to do more, you're doing a little bit of this and that, and this doesn't get you to the level of integration, collaboration that is needed in order for things to work smoothly, just because you have too many players to work with, and you don't have the certainty and that you know where to put the resources. Let me give you an example. Say you're a large CPO. There's so many EMPs that would want to have access to your network. And if you are to really create a great user experience for their customers, you have to go beyond the basic integration. I mean, yes, it's nice that you can be on Object and to do a publish and offer tool, but what's on the other side? What is their business model? How are they selling to customer? Are they on a subscription? Are they paying pay as you go? This may influence not just the communication channel, the technological integration, but it may influence what is my offer towards the CMSP. But this would require you to put in resources to have these discoveries, have these conversations, have these contracts, partnerships, where you can tailor your offering to the EMSP so that it creates the best user experience for their customers. But now do this with 20 EMSPs or 40, because some of our customers have to deal with more than 40 MSPs when they're the CPO. These fragmentation, I think it's normal in a market that needs to mature, because I mean, we don't know what the winning strategies are yet. They have to play out, but it also doesn't allow us to achieve this level of maturity, because we can't be sure that we are spending the resource in the right place. So we are a little bit hesitant on this. I think this is the main problem. It's not so much about strategy, so it's more about resources.
Got it. No, super helpful. I think great examples you shared. Still, I would say if maybe we as an industry, we could align on at least harmonize, probably not everything, but maybe 90, 95%, still it could create some more high level of efficiency, right? Because then even if you want to run things more specifically, but the fundament is probably the same. But I totally get the point that on top of the lack of resources, probably we also still are in a bit of a strategic phase, I would say, right, where things are still a bit unclear. As you said, what concept is the winning concept? So therefore, everyone is still pushing their own concept as the potentially winning
No, that
concept.
is true as well. And I don't want to underplay the importance of this as well. I'm just saying that even if we solve this, there's other factors that are into play as well, that go beyond the strategic goal and keeping it. I mean, I want to have bigger piece of a pie, but I mean, then the pie is smaller because we are not working together to make it bigger. This is still true.
Yeah. And on top of this, of course, we, and I think that's also important to reflect, we have a lot of requirements in place which are, let's say, fundamentally important because they are driven by regulation, but they're probably, not, at least in the first step, really provide a lot of positive impact on business models, right? There's, alone in Europe, there's a long list of requirements which are affecting CPOs and MSPs and other roles in the industry. And you know that still not yet every newly installed DC charger is having a payment terminal in place in Europe, even if that's a requirement already since last year. And let's see how this will be managed with upcoming regulation as well, like ISO 15408 is now coming to the market, right, from next year on for Dash 2 and from 2027 for Dash 20.
If I can pitch in here, just think about the fact that all of these regulations, many of those actually, they aim to create a better experience for the customer, to protect the customer, to give them a better customer experience. But also at the same time, they put so much strain on the resources of the companies that are in this business that they're not able to cope and they're not able to put enough resources so that they can achieve the best customer experience. Like, for example, you mentioned the payment terminals, but I mean, it's not about just equipping a charger with a payment terminal. In different markets, you have to deal differently with the fiscalization. In Germany now, we have to deal with iCorrect for the payment terminal as well. So all these put together, they are all on its own meant to improve the customer experience, but they put so much strain on the businesses that have to apply them that actually they hinder their ability to be able to do it properly.
Yeah. I totally agree, and that's exactly now creating even more challenges for companies, right? Because it's more often becoming a either this or that decision, which is probably also not really helping to move forward. And we just spoke about reliability, right? And operating additional devices with additional SIM cards is sometimes also an additional challenge for reliability as well. So I totally agree with you. On the other end, probably that's also a bit, how to say it, I think that's probably also a bit the core of the challenges that in reality, everyone is focusing on improving customer experience. But then when we talk about the way the industry is being set up, then we still rely a bit on older protocols. You just mentioned it, right? So we still see on the OCPP level side that, let's say, there 2.0.1, you don't find it that often nowadays, not to speak of 2.1. And the same a bit with the roaming protocols, that in most cases the oldest versions are still up and running. It works somehow, but not really in a way that this is supporting better digital customer experience. And that, of course, also explains a bit some of the challenges we are facing, like pricing transparency, right? If customers are running with RFID cards, how shall they know the price? Because it's a physical piece of plastic. It's not a digital device. We can see, okay, if I'm going to this charging station, I will pay this price. And by the way, it's now 9 a.m. in the morning. Maybe I'm paying a bit less because the utilization is lower or whatsoever. I think this is as simple as it sounds, but the reality is most companies are running different approaches which are less digital based, and probably that's not the only reason for the challenges EV drivers are facing, but it's part of the challenges, right? And you know my opinion. I'm not saying that Tesla is doing everything in a great way, but I think they have told us how things could look like. And yes, it's easier in your own ecosystem to do all of this. But in regard of customer experience, I think they're still doing a good job, giving customers good information, including waiting times, including price per charging session, and so on and so forth. And I would love to at least see kind of similar solutions also outside of the Tesla ecosystem. And often right now it's...
Well, guys, me as well. But I mean, there's two things that I want to point out here. One is, first of all, it's very funny that in a new industry, we have to talk about digitalization of the industry. I
Yeah,
mean,
indeed,
how
yeah.
did we end up here? Like, I mean, we know that all that we have to yet digitalize the space, but it is true. You're right. Then on the Tesla example, I think Tesla cut a lot of shortcuts to achieve this
Of course,
user
own
experience. I
ecosystem.
don't
It makes
think
it
it
easier.
would work.
Yeah.
Just think about how this happens when it in Europe with the same approach. I mean, it wouldn't be possible. And to be honest, I mean, even here they're facing challenges to have the best user experience, the same level of user experience for similar reasons that I pointed out. There's too many regulations to cope when it's still not as a mature industry as we put expectation towards. So yeah, that's again, it's a matter of resources as well. It's not just I don't think that many of these companies are running older technology because they don't see the benefit of using newer technology, whether it's protocols and so on.
Yeah, fair point. Again, I think, and that's also, now we talk a bit, maybe too much a bit about the challenges. That's also a bit the nature of us industry geeks, right? That we only talk about what is not working well and quite often miss a bit what is already working very well. I think as an industry, you have moved forward a lot, right? You just shared your examples on how you did it the first time in 2018. And I definitely would call this an adventure, going from Germany to Bulgaria this time with an EV. On the other end, we both and everyone else listening now to us probably still knows that since then, customer experience is still very unreliable. Just last week, we did a smaller roadshow focusing on Plug&Charge experience, and of course, we also had the situation that we went to charging locations where nearly all or even all charging stations were not working well. Credit card readers were not really functional, and then for a short moment, I really had this question in my head: what have we done in the last 10 years that is still not working yet? And just taking into account that, of course, there are a lot of people in place who don't know all of the specifics behind, and they just, as I said, they expect that it work. But on the other hand, I think we're moving forward a lot. We see it in EV sales, right? That's really right now, I think, a good year. The positive trend is very visible. And as I said, I think we're also moving forward in regards of the maturity level. Thank you for the great conversation so far, super insightful. As a last part of today's podcast, I would like to discuss with you a bit the actual trends in the industry. Right now, we see a lot of new startups coming to the industry. I would even say probably a bit flooding the industry. It's one of the big trends, which is everything on AI and reliability. How do you see this right now? I also have seen that you just announced a collaboration with an AI startup. So why have you done so, and how do you think this is helping us moving forward?
Well, first, I'm all for AI to help us solve problems, whether they're with reliability, whether it's efficiency of operations, whether it's developing features for what we are mostly using it in-house. I think there's problems that we haven't solved with before without AI that have solutions that we just didn't apply before. And maybe not all of them need AI to be solved, but maybe it's just a catalyst for these problems to now be finally solved. I think AI is not just a hype word, but it is overhyped. So both is true. Some of the problems that some startups have aiming to solve with AI are not so much of AI solvable problems. They're problems that are solved with software. But if it's the catalyst, then I'm all for it. And we as AMPECO, I mean, we want to enable these collaborations that we talked about, being able to use the services to create the partnerships that will give you an advancement in any direction that's meaningful for your business. We want to make this possible. So we've announced one, but we have more partnerships coming up with companies that use AI to solve problems that the industry has. And I think some would find the right formula and some are not. But I think that's true for any startup idea in business in any way. So we will see what really sticks, but I'm excited about the opportunities that current level of AI, LLMs in general present. So I'm looking forward to see the applications that address problems in the space.
Yeah, me as well. I said it's really a bit of a trend, and probably there's a reason for this trend, right? Because it's, as you mentioned, solving issues we have been able to solve before. Let's see. Also, very much looking into the next months to see a bit how this will work out. On the one hand, of course, it's impressive to see how much funding money is right now invested into the AI topic in general. On the other hand, it's probably one thing to invest, and a second thing to turn it into a profitable business model. But very exciting to see how this is moving forward. On top of this, I also wanted to hear a bit your thoughts on your global strategy. When you introduced yourself in AMPECO, you mentioned that you're right now running your services in 70 countries already, which is super, super impressive. So do you see right now any global trends, any global developments you could share with us?
Well, we are indeed active in very wide geographical areas. So, I mean, not only in Europe, all across Europe, but not only in Europe, Middle East, in Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, in the States, and also in Canada, but also in South America. So this gives us a very unique perspective on what's common and what's different. And the first thing that's common is that EV adoption is happening. So, I mean, we are seeing different pace. We have markets where it's accelerated, actually, compared to previous periods, and markets like the US when it's actually dampened by the I would say political notion towards EVs in general. But the problems are pretty much the same, and this is why a platform like ours, where we are at the core of the EV charging business, but we are not solving the final problem. So we are solving the common problems. It's applicable everywhere. It's applicable everywhere because the problems that you have to solve are the same. You have to be able to maintain a reliable service. So you have to be able to monitor and resolve problems on your network. You have to be able to onboard customers, give them access to your network, be able to process payments. All these things are common. The pace of development is different, but it follows EV adoption. So if you see a market where EVs are now increasing with a higher pace, like for example, you see this in South America, in Southeast Asia, in Australia. And to be honest, the biggest driver there is the Chinese manufacturers who have entered these markets quite heavily. Mm-hmm. You're seeing a little bit slower EV adoption in the States I've mentioned the reasons. And you're seeing in Europe, I would say, slower than what we all expected and saw a couple of years ago, but now faster than what we saw last year. The differences are, I think, fewer than the common trends in different markets.
Personally, I can totally resonate with this explanation because you know that also as Subtract we are sharing a very similar perspective. A charging station is a charging station, and it doesn't matter if it's located in California or France or Singapore. Of course, some of the topics are different, especially, again, regulation. Probably seen this especially in Asia, right? Every country is having their own kind of regulatory framework. But that's a bit how it is. But very exciting to see. Talking about once more about the global footprint you're having as AMPECO, is there a kind of lessons learned, main key takeaway you can share with us and our listeners in regards of your global strategy?
Well, I think the one thing is with Europe is the place where EV charging in general is most advanced in terms of the different business models that have played out, technology that have played out. So it's a unique position we are in this space where Europe is ahead in terms of what's tried and what works and what doesn't work compared to the States, for example. Because I mean, in any other technology, it's usually the other way around. So the main lesson learned that I have from us working in different geographies, it's mostly about what we see in other markets is usually just behind. And if you look for what happened in Europe, you can trace a future where it would look similar in other markets. And applying this principle has guided us on what we do in the North American market, what we do in emerging markets. So it's very unique and interesting that we can learn from in a technology-enabled space. We can learn from Europe to apply in other markets where otherwise usually they're ahead when it comes to technology, be it Southeast Asia or the States.
Yeah, normally the opposite, yeah. So let's not hope that we then see the German Eichrecht being implemented all around the world, but
let's hope we take the best, not the
okay,
worst.
Understood. Yeah, that's a fair comment.
It all started as a small hackathon in 2011. Today, it's the go-to event in EV charging. This September, thousands gather at Berlin's Tempelhof Airport for ICNC 25, a place to connect, exchange ideas, and shape the future of e-mobility. This year's theme, Shaping Customer Experiences. 3 days focused on turning innovation into better charging experiences. From keynote speakers to live demos in the Innovation Zone and Tech Village, see where e-mobility is headed. ICNC 25, September 2nd to 4th, Berlin. Register now at interchargenetworkconference.com.
This podcast series is also focusing a bit on the upcoming Intercharge Network Conference, taking place September 2nd to 4th in Berlin. And as you mentioned already, there will be a lot of other stakeholders from the industry. What is your idea? What is the main question you would like to discuss with all the other industry members at the ICNC? What is the topic you would like to discuss there and explore there?
Well, for me, first of all, the ICNC is the pillar event of the year. I'm not just saying this for you. I'm backing this up with how we plan our budgeting. There's a reason we are putting so much effort into really crafting an event that's very useful to the industry, because I think it's the event where we gather and we can go into a deeper conversation on topics that are not one shot. I mean, you can't solve them with silver bullet. So the topic may be customer experience, but there's a lot that goes into creating this good customer experience. And for me, mostly it's about these deeper conversations and forming the willingness and understanding and the path to collaborations that would help us as an industry solve these challenges. Whether it's opening up and connecting our networks, whether it's on progressing protocols and adoption. I mean, we don't need to do much more than just adopt better, newer technologies, or just commercially working closer, tighter together, even when there's overlap. I think we as a company, we've made a lot of efforts in this direction to actually start work with even direct competitors, if it's in the benefit of the customers that we're serving. Even if there's overlap, there's also areas where we can, through collaboration, move us forward. And I think at the ICNC, these are the kind of conversations and connections that can be formed and that can be moved forward. So I'm looking forward to this.
Good to hear. Thank you. Really a great statement at the end of this podcast session. Orlin, thank you again for joining our first edition. I think that was really a very good and insightful discussion. Thanks again for sharing all your knowledge with us. And happy to see you then in person in September in Berlin.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the ICNC.
Thank you.